And here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah Ferguson. I lead TCS's Enterprise Application Services and Ecosystem Partners Marketing team globally. I'm going to be your host today, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to step away from your activities and join us today. So just to set a little bit of context for our conversation, we know that the pandemic has greatly accelerated the need for leaders to have that strong digital foundation in order to really get the resilience and the innovation across business functions that's so critical in our post-pandemic world. We're seeing leaders have accelerated their technology investments to transform business functions and really quickly modernize their technology landscapes. So we know that future-proofing your business is not an easy undertaking. We recognize that successful enterprise transformations really need to start with a really robust readiness footprint. And at TCS, we think this is three critical areas for focus. So we're going to focus today on some of the topics around people, processes, and technology. So in today's symposium, we've got some great speakers lined up. CIO from Belgium Rail, who's going to talk to us about his experience in planning a massive transformation. And then we've got a great panel of some cross-industry leaders who are experienced in enterprise transformation, and you're going to hear from them firsthand what sort of challenges they've solved, what sort of hiccups they've seen along the way, share their insights, their best practices for what you should be thinking about and how you can be well prepared and really think about a successful enterprise transformation, whether you're just now starting your journey or you're well underway. So what are you going to walk away with today? A couple of things. We want you to know that we have best practices in envisioning enterprise transformation for your company. We're also going to think about how to align your enterprise technology strategy with business value. You're going to learn about the process for creating a holistic strategy for selection of that purpose-fit technology for the future. And we're going to learn about how to address those challenges and really prepare for that new paradigm shift. So we're going to test the virtual platform, and we're going to jump in with an audience poll question. So get ready to answer. The first question of today is, what is your top priority when defining your technology strategy? Having a platform to drive innovation, ensuring business resilience, leveraging the right technology as a key to business growth. So we know that these are all priorities, but if you think about which one is most critical to you and your organization and the journey that you're in right now, select that choice and hit submit, and we're going to bring you the results a little bit later in the program. Introduce our first speaker today, Morley. Morley's a business leader and strategic advisor to enterprises on ERP cloud transformations. He has over 25 years of experience in IT consulting and transformation, manufacturing and supply chain domains, and he's been working with TCS for over 15 years. So in his current role as an advisor, Morley partners with large enterprise customers and really helps guide them on their transformation journey. That includes defining enterprise application strategy, roadmap, modernizing cloud applications, outlining deployment strategies, approach, assessing change impacts. So he really is a very strategic advisor to help our clients, our customers, really get to that point where they're ready to take on an enterprise transformation and get the value from those transformations that we really need. So over to you, Morley, and I'll take it from after that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much. And good morning and good evening, everyone. I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to this exciting session with us on the topic titled Envisioning Enterprise Transformation. As part of the application advisory group that I lead, and we are part of the Enterprise Application Services unit within TCS, we have been working with quite a lot of clients over the last few years, especially helping them and enabling them to embrace the enterprise transformation. So I would like to share some insights on our experience as part of this session, primarily around three different dimensions. One is what kind of business trends that typically drive the enterprise application market. Second, while someone is choosing an enterprise application platform selection or adoption, what kind of key considerations should be made? And the third one, how are we being more pragmatic while we define the transformation journey? So with that, I will touch upon the first key topic, which is on the looking at what are the key business trends that drive the enterprise application market. So primarily, there are four uh, key business trends that I would like to highlight. Well, there are many more. The first one is we see there is a paradigm shift in the business model towards subscription-based business. Especially the pandemic has accelerated the end of ownership behavior in consumers, and many companies across industries are transforming their business towards a subscription-based business model. And they are now moving to anything as a service model, which offers more flexibility to our customers, especially in a crash-crunched economy. The second biggest trend that I would like to highlight is with more and more challenges coming in business operations, most of the companies have turned to a tool-based scenario planning, especially across an enterprise, to overcome the uncertainties which are currently prevailing in the macroeconomic conditions, which is further aggravated by COVID-19. Then the third uh, important trend that we see, which is actually accelerating the digital adoption in enterprise business area, is the explosive growth of digital commerce. While the social distancing rules have really transformed the buying behavior of both B2B and B2C consumers, but increasingly there are more and more digital channels opening up for the purchases. And accordingly, today, most of the CFOs have prioritized their investments in these areas and drive digital capabilities that add more and more digital commerce channels. If you look at the fourth and the important trend that we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg is the supply chain transformation driven by sustainability. So as we see, ESG is growing and gaining more and more prominence. So we are going to see more and more supply chain related transformation, especially the business model restructuring is going to come, and that's going to drive. And we are just what we are seeing today is just the tip of the iceberg. Coming to technologies, while I spoke about the business trends that really drive the technologies, but while you choose a technology, some of the key considerations that are absolutely critical is that one, when we define the application strategy or enterprise application strategy, it's very important that we align the same with your business strategies and outcome. And second, more importantly, I think it's you should use this opportunity to transform the overall stakeholder experience that encompassing your customers, suppliers, partners, and employees. And the last one, the technology could drive significant mileage in the post-pandemic era, is that to gain predictive insights for smart business decisions by leveraging the power of AI and ML, especially on enterprise data. So the third important, beyond the business and technology, the journey itself is a wonderful journey and exciting journey. And here I would like to say that every customer is unique or every enterprise is unique. And crafting a pragmatic deployment plan, which has a right balance between the speed of implementation and managing the risk of transition, is absolutely critical to fully realize the benefits of transformation. So as part of the program readiness, I think it's important to focus on the big picture and ensure the stakeholders are strategically aligned on the overall objective and business outcomes. Since while we see many of the clients are focused around the alignment on the project plan and the scope, but I think it's important to see the big picture here. The second important thing is before embarking on the plan, it's important that we establish the dependencies and build a robust plan to effectively manage the dependencies between people, process, and technology aspects of the program. The third one, very critical, is upfront identify the change impact areas across processes, operating model, and people aspects to create a suitable change strategy to handle these changes. So I think these are the three important areas that we are seeing with many of our clients. And that's what we thought of this session, which will be more exciting and covering most aspects of what I spoke about. And with that, over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Morley. That certainly is a great way to set the tone for our conversation coming up. So appreciate those insights. So we're going to jump over now and let's take a second poll. So this is kind of getting a feel for where our audience is in this journey. So the question today is, how soon are you planning to prepare for your enterprise transformation journey? Are you currently on the journey already? You're in the thick of things? You're ready now, but you haven't quite started. Short term, you're looking at it, you're going to be ready in 3 to 6 months. Or midterm, you're not quite there yet, you're planning, you're looking at 6 to 12 months out. So we're going to move quickly and do our last poll for the day before we move into our keynote session. So let's take a look at that. And we have, so tell us today, what dimension do you feel is the most challenging when your company is defining your transformation journey? Is it changing the business processes, the change management of your people, or really getting a strong technology strategy in place? So think about those three, pick the one that's most applicable for your situation, and thank you for participating in our live polls. We're going to see the results shortly thereafter, but let me give everybody a minute to respond to the poll. And now we're going to move on to our keynote speaker, Guido Lemaire. So Guido is the CIO at Sncb, which is the Belgian railway company. As the head of the IT department, he's currently leading the digitization of the Sncb and making the company ready for the future. As a CIO, he's responsible for the IT infrastructure, and he's preparing for the liberalization of rail traffic in 2023. So Guido has led some really challenging and intensive, ambitious projects for the last 2 years. He's currently in the middle of building the foundation for that digital future. He's also a thought leader. He has more than 20 years of managerial and technology expertise, and he's got a great track record with enterprise transformations from application development, package selection, implementations, people management, change management, service and support delivery. So I'm really excited to hear from you today, Guido, and give us some insights on your transformation success.
Thanks for the nice introduction. So in the upcoming 15 minutes, I will guide you through the way that we within Sncb are tackling that enterprise transformation. And I will more focus on the operational sides and how are we addressing that key challenge that has just been highlighted. Let's start briefly with a little bit of context. The world I'm living in exists out of two key components. One is my SAP environment, which all of you probably will know. The current SAP ECC environment will be end of life by 27. So there I've got a technology component which represents half of my landscape that needs an update and a refresh. And on the other hand, I'm also having my customers. My customers are getting more and more demanding. They want new sales channels. Nobody within my organization would have thought 2 years ago that we would sell tickets using chatbots or Facebook. But also those same customers are getting more and more demanding on, I want real-time info, I want it quick, I want it accurate. We are facing a challenge of what we call mobility as a service. Everybody is shifting to public transport, but wants that seamless door-to-door experience. We need to anticipate upon that one. And then internally, I've got my internal customers. We hired in the recent past a little bit more than 3,000 employees. We are currently an organization of 19,000 employees. But you attract people of the age of 20, 30. They no longer accept that you work with paper. They want new digital means. They want apps. They want quite a lot of new things. And that all is happening in the background of an upcoming liberalization. Initially, it was planned for 22, 23. We get a temporary arrangement until 32, but in the time frame of the upcoming 8 to 10 years, we need to prove to our customers, our government, that we are that worthy partner of having the public service offering as from 32. So quite over a lot of elements influencing the way our landscape needs to evolve. So we started with 2 programs, and I will highlight why. Because on one hand, we have Sherpa. Sherpa focuses on the SAP landscape and is more technology driven. It comes bottom up. It's about what kind of business capabilities do you need? We are doing things, supply chain in a certain way. Are we still willing to do that in the same way in the future? Or, and we'll discuss that later on, do we need to shift? Are we going for greenfield, brownfield? Are evaluations to be made in that area? On the other hand, in my non-SAP area, it's mainly focusing upon how do we prepare for that liberalization, that upcoming liberalization? It's more a top-down approach. It's about really strategic vision of a railway company. How do we need to evolve in regard to the PSO, the public service offering? It's about where do we need to optimize our cost? How do we going to increase punctuality? How are we going to increase customer satisfaction? That by 32, we are that preferred partner of choice. And despite the fact that it's 2 programs, we ensure that we've got steercos, separate steercos. We approach it completely different, but we ensure that at any given moment in time, those things are synchronized. And I mean, the key message, the key takeaway here is that even if you're working in the same organization, there is no one size fits all, depending on what part of your organization needs to be transformed. So planning is really key, and this is just a snapshot on the highest level of how we ensure that both are being aligned, but also that even in big companies, things can move on fast. We started the full digitalization roadmap as such from a planning perspective in June, and we will have finalized it in December. We start the second phase of our digitalization as from January next year. And what important is to know is that in our approach, independent from what we are doing, we are always taking along business in our technology journey. What I mean with that is business can't understand the complexity of an IT landscape, and as such doesn't need to understand. But still, we take them along in the journey and we make them clear, this is our internal IT challenge. And one of the key elements, according to me, for success in that regard is, yes, agility is important, and we pay really a lot of attention to it. But when stepping into those kind of transformations, just simply replacing an ECC environment towards a SAP for HANA, an S4HANA, or an Oracle, it takes you between 5 and 7 years. So yes, you can address it in your execution in an agile way, but you need to be clear as from day one, and we did that at the kickoff moment of the program, of each program, clear on what is the journey that we are stepping into, when we will do what needs to be delivered at which given moment in time, and we'll come back later on also on who is going to do that. But we did that as from day one, very clearly to the full business and the executive management, including our CFO, for the simple reason that if you're not doing that, people will get some kind of information and people will stand up. I didn't yet have the opportunity to speak out. If you plan in advance and you announce, you will have a right to speak out in 1 year or in 6 months or in 3 months. People will wait and will be patient. So it's really key to have that planned out, structured, and communicated that well. And it's about having your plans fit together, be clear, and on communication, it's kicking in an open door, but communication is key. At a certain moment in time, I took as a golden rule, we will repeat each communication 7 times. And despite that, and I had at a certain moment in time the impression I'm over-communicating, you still discover people in an organization that never had heard before about Sensa or Sherpa. So it's really key. And throughout that assessment, already mentioned 2 times before, it's about technology, people, and processes. How are you going to address it? And important to know is that it took me some convincing, but at the end, the lead of that transformation is on the IT side. Why? Because IT is that center within most organizations in which everything at the end boils together and where everything comes together. And it's often that sole party that is able to look across all functional departments. So we took the lead within IT to go really cross-departmental, the full Sncb. And what we did is we, depending on the type of technology, we stepped into, okay, tell us what you need. What is obviously and clear, and I have observed that in many organizations, is that IT needs to guide and support business in pronouncing about his capabilities that they need for the future. And at the end, what really showed off successfully is that even within IT, we translated those capabilities that were requested in really storytelling. Storytelling is key in transforming an organization, because we translated for each audience what will be the future of that audience, train drivers, train managers, but also our customers for the upcoming 10 years from a functional point of view. And we de-stressed completely the organization about what will be the impact on the IT organization. We'll manage. So having done that, what you see is that you get buy-in, you get support, and you get a common understanding of this is our common challenge. And as from that moment, and you've got that buy-in, then you can start. What I will share you now in the remaining 5 to 10 minutes, 5 minutes probably, is some best practices that I took along already on what we are doing currently, and which is often forgotten despite the fact that it's obvious to do so. Documentation, key. What you see in a multi-year transformation program, even if you've got agile delivery methods, is that people that are on the program shift. They get promoted, they leave the company, new people join. And what you see is that some decisions are taken now, as we speak today, but will have their first real visible impact on the terrain within 1 year. Probably somebody will stand up and say, I disagree because he just became manager. So document your decisions, the reason of decision, and pronounce them, because people also tend to forget. Decisions of 1 year ago, people might forget. Key takeaway 2 is define upfront what will be the plan that we will do and make people accountable, but pronounce that really clearly. I mean, this program, this organization expects from you to take an accountability at that moment given in time. It prevents that, for example, people will stand up from the floor and say, I didn't have the opportunity yet to talk, to pronounce, to give you input. So put it forward straight away as from start, and people will be patient. Otherwise, you will face resistance at any given phase in time. Third finding is that making choices always is difficult. We apply a quite simple but really effective way of guiding business to make choices and prioritize where needed, and that's quite simple. Bottom up, we listen to bottom up or top down. We listen to business, and we always, from an IT perspective, guiding the questions to in the context of a public service offering or whatever. Where do you want to innovate? Where do you want to go really disruptive? For example, as a public offering of train, passenger transport, there is not an absolute need to go really innovative. On the other hand, differentiating, when liberalization will enter on the Belgian market, you definitely want to be differentiating in your customer touch points. Okay, we'll see how we address and what kind of differentiation will happen. And then last but not least, where it's just operational excellence at the lowest cost possible, and going forward at 100% efficiency. And we do that on process, technology, people, and the way we need to invest. But this, on one hand, allows business to guide decisions that they need to take. On the other hand, it allows us as being IT suppliers to have that one fundamental debate. Because, for example, in the part where you need to become an operational excellence, SaaS is a solution. You go for standard configuration, you go for standardization, and as an IT responsible, you don't deviate from standards. On the contrary, where differentiation is needed, you can go potentially for a SaaS solution, but you will be faced with customizations, and you have to accept as an IT leader that customizations will happen. And in the innovation part, simply forget package selection, you go straight away for custom build. So those kind of mechanisms, always led by IT, are enabling quite easy to step into that technology transformation or that organizational transformation. And last but not least, no surprise, in an organization of enterprise in general, key stakeholder management is key. And what I often see in programs, or where quite a lot of programs fail, is that stakeholder management happens on gut feeling. What I learned sometimes in the hard way is that stakeholder management is something that you plan upfront. We had a clear plan upfront when we started with Sensa and Sherpa, who at which state has something to contribute and will be a stakeholder, and how to address that. For example, we will step into execution of the ECC migration. We are now already coaching our people within the IT organization in two senses. Yes, you had experience in SAP ECC. You might have a need for experience in SAP for HANA. Nobody has that. How will you introduce that knowledge? And on the other hand, 1 year further, how do you retain those people? Because as for HANA, skills are scarce. Finance, you need to manage your CFO that year after year, and it was already highlighted previously as well, sees his costs shifting from CapEx to OpEx, and your CFO doesn't like that because it influences his EBITDA. You need to manage that. You get regulation that imposes you certain rules, power users that might stand up. So we mapped all key stakeholders up front, and we have a dedicated plan to manage those key stakeholders. And it all seems obviously, and as such, it's not so complex, but the lessons learned that I definitely have based on experience from the past is that quite a lot of organizations don't pay attention to the basic hygiene of those kind of transformational programs. And with that final conclusion, I would like to wish you all a happy and successful transformation journey. And with that, I'm handing over back to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Guido, for sharing those insights. I think our audience will certainly be able to learn from your experience and the experience that you've had with some of those challenges and how to address them. So appreciate you joining us today. It was a really interesting story. So we're going to move on and now take a look at our poll results. So when we look at the results, let's see how we did. So on the question of what's driving your technology strategy, so leveraging it for business growth is the top response over here. Over 55% of you really are looking at technology as the business growth driver compared to some of the other areas. Very interesting. I know our panelists will probably want to reflect on some of this when we get to that shortly. Let's look at the next poll results. The next question was, where are you in the journey? So many of you are already in the transformation journey, so that's great. So you're already in the thick of things. Hopefully some of the insights you've heard today have given you some thought, and maybe some of you will want to join us at some point and share your transformation journey as well. Looks like a good chunk of you are still in the midterm, looking 6 to 12 months out, and then 10 and 11% ready now and in the short term. So, you know, glad to hear that lots of you are joining us and you are in the middle of your transformation journeys. And let's see what the last poll results are. The dimension is the most challenging. So interesting. So we see change management, the managing the people aspects is the most challenging. Okay, that's going to be good food for thought for some of our panelists as well. And then coming in a short second with the changing of the business processes. And interesting that the technology adoption is the least challenging. So I think that's good news for our technology teams. All right, so thank you for participating in those polls. Those were fun. We're great to see some insights there. So I want to move on and introduce our panelists for today. I'm going to give some intros, let them say hi, and then we'll sort of jump into the conversation. So the first up, I'd like to introduce Kathy Holt. Kathy is the Business Information Officer for Toyota Financial Services in lending, insurance, and banking products. She leads a team that delivers information technology solutions that are necessary to provide those financial products to TFS customers and dealers. Kathy oversaw the company's transformation to a modern digital banking platform with functionality that let the bank allowed banking to be extended to the Toyota team members. Prior to her role at TFS, Kathy was a vice president of technology at the US-based retailer JCPenney. She has over 20 years of working in information technology, and she's been recognized widely for her expertise in engaging stakeholders, transforming business initiatives into solutions that introduce, extend, and modernize organization capabilities. So with that, welcome, Kathy, joining us today. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Pleased to be here on this important topic.
Great. All right, and then the next I'd like to welcome Giri Sncb. Giri's based in Mumbai, India. He heads the Indian Hotels Company Ltd, which is better known as Taj Hotels, and he's the Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. As a chartered accountant and an MBA, Giri's broad-based career spans over 30 years in finance and commercial across multiple industries. This includes consumer businesses, financial services, retail, pharma, across Asia and Europe as well. He joined the Indian Hotels Company from Merck, the American pharmaceuticals company, where he was the CFO for South Asia, and as the business head for Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. In 2021, Giri was inducted into the CFO India Hall of Fame for a lifetime of contribution to the world of finance. So welcome, Giri.
Hi. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think it's good to be here. I think I'm often asked what keeps me awake at night. For the first time, I must say, a conference at 10:30 p.m.
Well, we're happy you join us from all corners of the world. I know we've got quite a few time zones covered today, so thank you for joining us. And my next panelist, I'd like to welcome Pankaj Tiwari. Pankaj joined Penumbra in 2016. He currently serves as the Vice President of Information Technology with over 20 years of experience in high-tech, semiconductor and solar industries. His expertise includes the successful blending of knowledge of business operations and technology to analyze those operations and create that necessary change that helps those companies drive profitability and efficiency and productivity. So prior to joining Penumbra, Pankaj served as a Senior Director for Global Business Application at Atmel Corporation, and he's also held executives roles at Nano Solar and Marvell Semiconductor. So Pankaj, welcome to you today.
Thank you, and happy to be part of the panel and looking forward to our discussion.
Great, thank you all for joining us. So we have 3 topics that we want to discuss today with this panel. So I'm going to start by posing the questions to each panelist, and we're going to hear their perspective and experience. And then we'll move on to the next round and let each of them respond to the topic at hand. So just jumping right in our first round of discussion, what we're going to focus on are business objectives and outcomes, and how to align your company's vision with the technology strategy. So what are the expectations from modern enterprise applications, and how can those applications really drive the exponential business value that we know that leaders are expecting? So I'm going to start with Giri. So the question for you today is, as the head of a finance business function and overseeing the accounting for over 100 hotels across 4 continents, what are those business outcomes that you expect to be driven by your modern finance applications and technologies?
No, thank you, Sarah. I think we are a 120-year-old company, the world's strongest brand last year, but the pandemic kind of changed everything in terms of how we looked at business. And I think, one of the things that I've been looking at working alongside my CIO is the the tech itself actually, because the problem we have is that as Belgium Rail presentation showed, I think we are also on an ERP which is end of life in that sense. Business models have changed. The ERP is heavily customized, and I don't think people understand what's in the customization today. Things like chart of accounts are kind of outdated. Data analytics is not being enabled. Uh, ERPs are inflexible, and therefore there is a real need to change actually. Because what is really important from a business perspective today is that we need to drive revenue, and we saw that during the pandemic. How do you leverage your understanding of the business on a real-time basis to help drive revenue? Because ours is a daily business actually. And how do you support decision making? The second is operational efficiency, and is very critical because the hotels industry is a high cost industry, and therefore we do believe that technology, digitization, etc., can help to simplify operational efficiency and make operations efficient, process simplified, and therefore reduce costs. And finally, I think if we are a public company, and therefore in terms of governance and compliance requirements, they are really going up actually. I think these are the three things which have been fundamental for us in terms of looking at what do we do to support all of this. And I think what is really important for us when we look at technology at this point of time is scalability is very critical here. Agility is very critical here, and resilience is very critical here. As a company, we are resilient actually. The pandemic taught us that we could be creative and we could be adaptive actually. Like, I think we launched, for instance, within a month during the pandemic, a food delivery app business actually, which is growing very smartly. So we were able to do that because we were able to quickly leverage on a technology to support the online delivery as an example actually. And I think what is very good is that working with TCS, we were also able to look at simpler solutions because we, for our owners, what do I mean when I say we are owners? We don't own all the properties that we manage. Several of our properties are owned by third parties, and we are merely operators actually. So one of the things we have been very conscious of is as we implement technology to drive our business, we need to be cognizant in terms of not just what works for us, but also what works for our partners. And I think TCS has helped us in the last few years in terms of making that happen actually. So I think some of these things clearly have been the key business objectives which are driving our current thinking in terms of tech actually.
Very well said. Yes, I think agility is definitely a common thread through a lot of the conversations for sure today. Thank you for that insight. So I want to shift gears to Kathy. So Kathy, today there's a lot of volatility in the market, and like we've heard from all these speakers, business models are changing and they're changing quickly. How would you like enterprise applications like ERPs and CRMs, how do those play an adaptive role for the business needs of not just today, but of course everybody's looking to tomorrow?
Sure, thank you for the question. And very similar to how Girdhar had described, we had the same challenges with highly customized legacy applications and being in a compliance industry. And 2 years ago, we provide, as a business, we provide financing, loans, leases, insurance products for Toyota, Lexus. 2 years ago, we had the opportunity to onboard a third private label client. And it really just couldn't do that with our legacy system. So we architected an entire new platform to put into place for this. And it had to be extendable and it had to be flexible so that we could continue to modify it and change it as the business changes. And as technology changes, I think we're all aware of how quickly technology changes. So of course, we put it on a cloud-based platform so that it would be scalable. But one of the key things we did is we made sure that it was highly API enabled. And in that way, we get to own the customer, dealer, agent experience on the front end, and we get to leverage industry solutions on the back end. And then, through the APIs, we can interact between the two. And in that way, we can continuously, quickly deliver capabilities in small, compartmentalized ways because it's not one monolithic solution. And we can leverage our data chain in the middle to kind of make the data move back and forth and to shield the applications from the level of transformation so that we could continue to move forward without it becoming a big bang type of an implementation. So that's the platform that we put into place. We launched it with our private label opportunity Mazda in April of last year, and then we're continuing to evolve it and grow it since then. But that's how we architected a platform for scalability and growth and flexibility.
That's great insight. We haven't really delved into the importance of integration and integration tools, so that's a good angle to be thinking of in transformation for sure. So Pankaj, we understand your organization is in the middle of an enterprise digital transformation. Can you just share some of those insights on, what your key business value and outcomes have been that you're set to achieve with your enterprise applications?
Sure, it's a really loaded question. I'll see if I can do justice to that. So, Penumbra, we started as a medical device company addressing challenging medical conditions, primarily treating stroke. And then recently, we also ventured into immersive health, developing rehabilitation technology using virtual reality. And Penumbra has been going through a rapid growth, and we have been innovating faster than any of our peers. So from IT perspective, before we start any transformation, it's paramount that we understand what it means for the organization itself. Because no matter what technology we implement, it becomes suboptimal the day we start implementing it. Business is constantly evolving, and so are the processes. So the rate of change of business is always higher than the rate of change of any system we put in place. And I believe that a successful digital strategy could radically change employees' behavior and companies' culture. So keeping that in mind, I think there are three major outcomes I try to focus and achieve. First and the foremost is the employee or customer experience. No matter what system or technology we put in place, if it does not add to a better experience, or if it does not improve the quality of work, I believe it will not stick, and we won't have happy user at the end of it. I mean, just to give you an example, if we set out to transform our pricing and quoting process, and we decide to move away from paper or Excel-based system to a new CRM, CPQ system, the general approach people take is, now we have all the pricing in the system based on various discounts and all, it goes through various approval chains. Now you have put a system in place where there are 4 different levels of management approvals. There's a legal approval, marketing approval, finance approval. Now, at the end of it, the sales team gets very frustrated. It's like earlier, I could have sent an email to my department head and get it approved. Now, making it go through the system. Not. So at the end of it, we lose customer experience. And that is, one of the key things which we focus as our key driver or the outcome of any technology, innovation. And that also brings me to my second outcome, which is like when we are putting all these systems in place, how do we focus in reducing non-value add activity? The idea of any digital transformation is to reduce non-value add activity while optimizing experience. So like if I go back to my previous example of quote approval, while we put a system in place and with all these approvals, it gives you a sense of security that now we have a lot of oversight, but all the approvals which we have put in place, in my mind, it's all non-value add activity. Because every time, we end up adding people for approval, people try to do their best and they will ask a lot more questions and try to give their point of view. And now the quoting process, when there was no system, it used to take 2 days for approval. Now it takes 15 days for approval, right? So the ideal system should eliminate most of the non-value add activity. In this scenario, it should run through various simulations and present instantaneous code to the sales team so that, they are now more efficient. They know the code they are presenting is accurate and it will go through well with, internal company as well as with the customer. And then the third one, where I focus more acutely on is how do we closely align with business and find opportunities to co-innovate, whether it is product innovation or whether it is a process innovation. And I think, like even in today's call, what Giri or Kathy pointed out, when pandemic hits or things like that, even technology becomes very important. And if you are not embedded with your business that closely, it becomes very challenging for us to jointly innovate. So those are the three major outcomes I focus on.
Thanks. I think probably all of us who are in very large matrices organizations really understand those struggles with some of the reduction of the non-value add activity, right? I think the bigger your organization, I think the harder and longer those approval processes become. So definitely some strong insights there. So moving on to the second topic for discussion today, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of making the right choices for technology. So I want to toss it over to Kathy and hear from you a little bit about, can you talk about the digital factory model you're embracing and just tell us or highlight how it influences the technology choices for your future and your enterprise applications?
Sure. I mentioned earlier some of the technology we chose for the solutions, but now let's kind of move to some of the technology we chose to enable the transformation from a IT process. So we transitioned to the Agile methodology, which most companies probably have done by this point in time. We did that a couple of years ago. We call our Scrum teams our digital factories. It's kind of a nod towards our Toyota heritage of having this continuous flow methodology in our factories for producing cars. We want to produce deliverables, at that kind of a speed rate, and that was the concept there. So there were a series of tools that we needed to put into place to support this new methodology. First and foremost for us was Jira, which is the tool that we use to kind of collect our stories, which are our requirements, get them prioritized, get them sequenced, get them defined with approval criteria, and most importantly, create transparency on what each factory or Scrum team is working on and how it interrelates with the other factories. So that was a key piece of technology we needed to both implement and organize the use of and then roll out to the organization, both from an IT and business perspective, so that we have a way to kind of collect the go-forward plans. Then, of course, there were other tools we needed to roll out. We needed a source control library, because if you're going to be touching and deploying code every 2 weeks, it can't be sitting on someone's desktop. So we needed source management, artifact management, deployment management, and we needed to start automating the testing process, because again, if you're going to touch code and deliver it every few weeks, you need to automate testing, especially the regression testing suite. So there were a set of technologies we put into place for our methodology. And then we also put into place a process that any new technology we want to bring into the company gets evaluated to make sure it meets our principles, i.e. it's cloud-based, it's API-oriented, and it fits within our ecosystem so that we don't start building one-offs that are difficult to interrelate with all the other functionality we have. So those are some of the both processes and technologies we put into place to enable the transformation.
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. And then I'm going to pass it over to Pankaj, back to you for this one. So we're seeing a lot of openness in adopting a hybrid architecture instead of the vendor-driven sort of monolithic application architecture with business value as the core. So when we think about this, what are the key parameters of the evaluation criteria that you have when you're considering like a purpose-fit or future-ready ERP platform?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It seems like, we have gone full circle. I still remember when I started my career back in India, working for Apple Computers. My job was to build a custom application for their product lifecycle management for their Macintosh. And soon after, we came to a point where everybody started looking down upon building custom applications. And we focused very heavily on, putting our processes around one big, gigantic ERP systems. But in last several years, I think we have pivoted again, and now the focus is more towards adopting multi-system, best-in-class applications. I mean, now if you look at any company, most of us would have anywhere between 15 to 100 different SaaS applications, even multiple platforms for our infrastructure, and possibly hybrid infrastructure. So at Penumbra, what we have and manufacturing applications, ERP applications, or whether it is clinical or infrastructure. And along with that, we have built a robust architecture and strong capabilities around integration and data management. So as data moves from system to system, it transforms, gets enriched, gets mutated, and even at times gets degenerated, right? So it's important to have a strong data management practice as it flows through the system. And even after doing all that, most of enterprise get lost because now we are living across so many systems that it makes it impossible to get accurate view of business. And therefore having the right analytics strategy is also very important. This is one area where a lot of innovation has happened in the last decade or so. And I believe to create an intelligent enterprise, it's also important to have a great analytical platform so that with all these 100 various SaaS applications where our data is fragmented and is transformed and mutated, how do still business get one single point of view of business at any given point in time? So taking all that into account, while selecting an ERP system, some of the key factors we looked into was first, whether they have a strong med device, life sciences capability, ease of use, because as we are transitioning hundreds and thousands of employees from one system to another, it's important that they are able to adopt and understand. And some of the other ones were like product features and capabilities, their long-term roadmap, where they are heading with their product, and their strong inbuilt analytics.
Yeah, that's great insight. I really like that we have three very different perspectives from different industries here, and seeing some of the common ground and how each of you are approaching this, but in your own sort of industry-specific ways, but with some common ground mixed in between as well. So Gary, back over to you. Let's talk a little bit about the hospitality industry. So we're seeing some regain in momentum in this post-pandemic era for many parts of the world. So how are modern enterprise applications, how can they drive more business resilience, that visibility, the intelligence, the better forecasting? What are you seeing in your space?
Yeah, no, thank you, Sarah. I think it's absolutely true that we are seeing the hospitality business kind of rebound back very strongly. And as I said in the beginning, we are kind of rethinking what we should do with our outdated legacy technology. I think the first thing I do want to say, when I saw the poll results where there was some of you who were kind of still yet to think about and starting the ERP, I think the first thing I just want to say is that I'm part of the executive management at my company. But if you ask me honestly, do we understand what needs to be done? Honestly, not. I think it must be a common problem in every company where how do you believe that the top management understands? And the answer is no. That's number one. I think, and that's where I think one of the things that we have tried to do, not always consistently, is that we bring in folks like TCS or other service providers, other partners, in terms of regular conversations with the board, in terms of what is happening, and kind of try to build alignment in terms of what is needed. I think, for instance, at the end of this month, I have an audit committee meeting, which is when one of the things I'm going to be doing with that audit committee meeting is basically to align with them the imperative to change some of our technology aspects, actually, like ERP, the planning systems, etc. So I think aligning there is probably one big part of the work that we have to do. The second thing, what I really discovered in a legacy company like ours, I think it was great to see the Belgium Rail presentation where all the ducks were in a row, actually. But the point is, what I really discovered when I joined the company in 2017 was that the revenue management team, where it is based on daily business, was much more agile and had already started using cutting edge technology. The rest of the organization was way behind, actually. So we were a two-speed company. Initially, I wondered how it will work, but now I'm increasingly thinking that it may be not always be possible for the organization to lay out a 10-year technology blueprint which is aligned across the top management before you start. Sometimes it is okay for different departments to kind of plan their own tech journey. Of course, it is possible that there will be alignment challenges, but that's okay. I think alignments will get realigned actually. So the two messages I really want to say is that top management always does not know. And secondly, it is okay not to have an enterprise-wide vision, but let different departments drive their own vision and over a period of time align them. It might sound inefficient, but honestly, it builds better alignment because then it becomes a pull as opposed to a push actually. I think, and also what that does is that when every department drives its own tech transformation, I think fit for purpose is much better actually, rather than trying to say that this is what we are going to do, which fits across actually. So I think these are some things as have been my practical learnings actually, because I think what I've realized is that speed is not necessarily a strength here. Alignment and effective implementation, whereas the Forrester presentation, and as Morley said, the customer experience, employee satisfaction, and all of those come together is more important than speed actually. In fact, one of the questions that I find in some of my CFO groups is that where some of the CFOs ask me, you know what, I'm really late on the block. Am I a loser? You're not, because the way tech is changing, being the last in the block actually means that you are able to leverage off learnings of other companies, and tech is getting cheaper actually. So that's the other thing I do want to give comfort, saying that if you believe that you are not the first guys and you are the laggards, you're not actually. You may be smarter to sort of having done it much later actually. I think that is something I do want to say. And the other thing, this has been spoken about earlier in the session. I've been really tired of these ERPs which have, high setup, high costs in terms of implementation, annual costs, lack of customization for the country. For example, tax customization as an example. I've been really tired actually. And I think also people have spoken earlier before in terms of SaaS type services. And I think I'm becoming a bigger fan of SaaS type services, which is easier in terms of the impact on P&L. Honestly, I think there was a comment made, do CFOs care about CapEx versus OpEx? There is a merit up to a point, but beyond it, I think as long as we make sure that we have flexibility and manage costs. And one of the biggest things that the pandemic has taught us is that we have been trying to convert our fixed costs into variable costs actually. Because what we realized in the pandemic, in March 2020, we had the best result in 10 years. In April 2020, we were a near zero revenue company, and because of the pandemic, and we had these huge fixed costs. And so now the whole attempt since then has been to say, how do I convert my fixed costs into variable costs actually? And therefore, I think those have been some of the considerations, building the commercial case in terms of how do you build the commercial case to sort of make sure that one, the CapEx is optimized, the OpEx is optimized, you're kind of moving away from a fixed cost into a variable cost. And when you use things like SaaS, then I think what happens is that you're also able to make costs, in small lots actually. And I think that's much better. So these are some of the considerations that we are thinking about when we think about technology actually. The other thing which has worried me is that is data. Data, I think, because we are as in the hospitality industry, customers, we are very customer centric, and we have maybe millions of customers who are on a loyalty database and others who kind of use our hotels actually. And I think one of the biggest challenges is clean data actually. That's been one of the biggest challenges because multiple systems, legacy systems, capture data at different points. And therefore what happens is that where is the single version of the truth actually? And one of the things I've been trying to do, even in terms of reporting, where I'm trying to build an integrated reporting, because what is happening is that different departments have been trying to develop different reports actually. And I really want to go towards the democratization of data. And we are trying to get into data lakes actually. So that data is democratized. People can then pick and choose what they want from a data lake. And data lake ensures that there is a single version of truth in terms of the cleanliness of data actually. And of course, some of the things like GDPR becomes important. And the other thing about people, moving on to the third part, which is first was the tech, second was the data, and the third is the people. I think one of the biggest things I'm looking for is really how do you enable collaborations actually? I think I think tech can be a fantastic enabler for collaborations. Otherwise, I think while generally collaborations are okay, but organizations also, we do see silos happening. And I think tech can really enable collaborations actually to make happen. And the other thing about employees now is that, there was a mention about customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. And for us, employee satisfaction is very important because that directly impacts customer satisfaction, because we are a 24-hour business actually. The customers could check in, check out, order meals from middle of the night, and and ask for any kind of service in our hotels actually. And I think that takes a toll on the employees actually. How do you make the employees' life simpler is one of the biggest considerations. So for me, these have been some of the anchors which is kind of driving our thinking in terms of what is the right technology solution which can help us address all of this actually.
Yeah, it's certainly been a roller coaster. I mean, that's great insights. I'm sure the folks who are feeling like they're a little bit behind will find some comfort in hearing from you that there's different paces of embracing this. So those were some great insights. Thank you so much for sharing that in-depth perspective. Certainly helpful. I'm going to quickly move to the third round of discussion so that we can all chime in on the last topic for our conversation today. So the third round is going to talk about envisioning the journey for enterprise transformation. So Pankaj, I want to go back to you on this one, and I've got two-part questions. So let me ask you both, and then you can kind of sort through how you want to respond to these two parts. So when defining the ERP and CRM transformation journey and its deployment timeline, what are your thoughts around having that fine balance between achieving those real quick wins versus maybe managing the transition risks? And then the second part of that question is, so how do you get your teams really prepared to embrace the lean ERP, with out-of-the-box functions of the modern solutions? So I'll pause there with the two-part question and pass it back to you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And before I answer your question, I'm really impressed, even though Giri started by saying that people at the top doesn't always know, but it's very impressive how much you know, Giri, about technology, even being in the finance, which is very amazing. And also I think, Giri, you pointed out a very pertinent point that sometimes people spend a lot of time putting these technology landscape for 10 years, what our technology landscape is going to look like. But the beauty of technology is it changes so fast that whatever you put in place in 2 years' time, it becomes outdated. So even at Penumbra, we do not spend way too much time looking beyond 18 months to 2 years. We don't spend too much time because we know whatever we know today is going to be significantly different with what we'll learn in next 9 to 18 months. So thank you, Giri, for your insight. Now, going back to the question, we have been very thoughtful in our approach from the very beginning. It is ingrained in Penumbra's culture that we want to get things right than to get it fast. And I think it also comes primarily for us and operating in an environment where quality of our product is very, very important. Every product which we make goes into somebody's body and helps save their life. And that culture and thought process also transforms into anything else which we do at Penumbra. So our thought was that with our current, ERP or CRM or MES system, which we started to put in place and started modernizing our technology landscape, that we wanted to build a really strong foundation. We spent a lot of time to get our team ready and focus on what is the problem we are trying to solve, and how do we take that journey with, mindfulness. So we are not in these transformations for quick wins, but at the same time, we don't want to embark on a never-ending journey. So what we did was, we have defined these projects into various meaningful phases and timelines. I mean, each one of these are a major, massive transformation projects on its own. And at Penumbra, actually, we are trying to do quite a few of these things together, because we don't have the luxury of time to do them one at a time with the pace the company is scaling. So it was important for us to make sure that we are not embarking on this journey just on our own, like, whether IT is doing it or manufacturing is doing it or various departments are trying to do things on their own. So we wanted to make sure that, we all as an organization have a shared vision and goal, and we all are in it together. And we spend a lot of time defining that, what does it mean for Penumbra? And at Penumbra, we have a very strong executive support and involvement, starting from our CEO. From the very inception of this journey, we spent enough time to share, the information with business as widely as we could, and we ensured that we have a really strong business engagement and support. And before we started any system implementation, actually, we set up a process team where we spend a lot of time with business to start looking at their processes, running Kaizans and Kanbans, and we try to identify the areas of improvements. And actually at Penumbra, what we have defined as people, process, data, and technology. So before we start any project, we actually take a very hard look at whether do we have enough people, do they have enough time to support it, do we need to train them, do we need to reskill, do we need to hire them. And we do not start any engagement until we ensure we have the right team in place. And they, once we have that, we still then talk about process, saying, yeah, you want to implement a technology, first let's talk about our process. Is our process streamlined? Is that the process we want to live with? Is it really at every step, is it adding a value, or we are just doing it because of the legacy? So we spend a lot of time looking at our process, running Kaizans, changing, transforming our processes. And then after that, we start looking at our data. I mean, we all know that, putting technologies, while it could be challenging and whatnot, but if our processes are not well defined, if our data is wrong, technology becomes very, very difficult to get it right at. So we spend enough time, ensuring that we understand our data, we clean our data, and also, as company evolves, our data, I think companies tend to develop selective blindness, which means we know our data is wrong in certain areas, and somebody opens it in Excel, massages it, and moves forward. But when you are putting a new system in place, it's important for us to have the cleaner data. So we spend enough time focusing on our data. And if we have done people, process, data, then technology becomes very easier. The road to technology then becomes much faster. So most of our technology implementation does not take as much time if we just take focus from the point we start implementing technology. But the path to technology is where we focus quite a bit on. And that helps us to make sure that we achieve our result much faster.
Great insight. I know that we are kind of getting to the bottom of the hour here, and I know I want to still hear from Giri and Kathy. So let me just jump quickly, Giri, to next question for you. If you can just kind of get your response. The question is, seamless adoption of new processes and systems is critical for the success of a transformation. How do you think enterprises need to really prepare from a people perspective to embrace for a successful finance transformation? Similar, we just heard about the people processes from Pankaj. What are your thoughts, Giri?
No, that's right. I think our thoughts are similar to what Pankaj said. I think one of the big things that we need to remember about the Tata Group is that we don't fire people at the Indian Hotels, actually. And therefore, when we talk of technology adoption, I think we need to bear that in mind, which means I have people in my teams who have worked for 35 years and still have maybe 5 more years left, actually. So one of the biggest things that we have been kind of grappling with and kind of making sure that any new technology is kind of done empathetically is that how do we work with our people and help them transform? I think it's a personal transformation, which means that how do you help them reskill and how do you help them better collaborate, which I spoke about earlier. So, but I think this is probably, and that what that does is that it may have a slightly longer path in terms of implementation, but that's okay. To give you an example, I've been setting up shared services in hotel clusters, actually, and for finance and accounting. And you could argue that why not have a single shared services center in the country which can take care of all the clusters together. Technology, from a technology perspective, totally possible, but from a people perspective, impossible, because doing it in cluster wise ensures that I can move people into the shared services center. Lift and shift is the first way, and work with clusters, and maybe 3-4 years down the line we can kind of move to a much more national structure when the business has grown and we have been able to absorb people as part of the growth. Actually, I think that's been one core fundamental way in which we have worked with people. I think the other thing is that as we looked at some of the work on people, I think we have been, hotels, hotels essentially is an on-site business. So you're very careful about what technologies we implement on-site and the people requirements for on-site versus what is it that can be shifted out from the hotels into a centralized kind of a setup like credit control as an example, and therefore bring in the relevant tech to kind of deal with it, to be honest, actually. And the third thing on the people side, it's not just people within the organization. I feel that when we're working with vendor ecosystem, for instance, I think onboarding vendors, because many of our vendors are all small vendors. Let's say the morning vegetable vendor, the fish vendor, etc. Actually, so when you say that, I have this tech implementation which can go online and make seamless in terms of interactions with you on orders, receipts, bills, and payments, it may just not work. And therefore, the people aspects of technology implementation had to be carefully considered, because many of these vendors, which are all local vendors at hotels, may just not be tech savvy at all, actually, in terms of tech savvy, not in terms of their ability to use mobile phones and all that, but in terms of having systems which can talk to each other and make it simpler, actually. So I think the people aspects of it for us has gone beyond just our employees. And even with our customers, like for instance, when we talk about digital check-in, check-out and digital cards as an example, where people can log in, open hotel rooms with their mobiles and use key cards, not key cards. I think in our palaces, because we run a set of palaces, we're very careful in kind of implementing those kind of technologies, because people who come and pay $1,000 or more per night to stay in our palaces expect the butler to kind of take care of their needs, to be honest, actually. So tech in those environments may be seen as dilution of service, because they expect a butler on hand. They expect to be kind of, walk through on multiple things. So I think the people aspect can sometimes be interesting in terms of how we have to deal with it. And hence the technology choices can be very different. In the economy sector hotels, I can do all the technology, but in our palaces, maybe not. So I think some interesting questions about how we have to navigate through the people landscape as we implement technology. I will stop there.
Very, very true on all accounts. Interesting insight for sure. I know we're a little over time, but Kathy, I definitely want to get to you on this last question. So organizational change is a critical dimension when we're talking about transitioning people, processes, and technology to that new operating model. So what are the key change dimensions that you like to envision when you're embarking on your transformation journey?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, in respect for time, I'll be brief in my response, but we did see in the survey that the thing that is most prevalent on people's mind is that level of change management. And you have to be really thoughtful about the level of change that you need to bring the team along with to support your strategy, but also the level of fatigue, change fatigue that you put into the organization, making sure that the change you're introducing is really of high value and needed at that moment. So we implemented what we call the Digital Academy, which is our teaching and learning institute. It covers, we started it with the Agile methodology, but it covers a source of learning for process, for technology, for leadership, for culture. It just continued to grow on the number of subjects that it covers. And it provides information in person, virtually, with recorded materials. And then there's also a kind of a written playbook, if you will, of how our process works that both newcomers can leverage and people can use as reference. So we just built out a really rich catalog of material to be referenced and accessed whenever it's needed. And that was key to us. And we continue to build it out as we find elements of change that people need help with, we put something out there, and we encourage everybody in the organization to be both learners as well as teachers. When you've conquered a topic or you have something to share about a topic, you create content and you put it in the catalog for others. So that's how we've kind of expanded the level of information to provide to help with the change management throughout the organization.
Yeah, I think I love that phrase, change fatigue. I think that probably resonates with everybody these days, a lot of change fatigue. So thank you to all the panelists. That was great insight. I'm going to quickly pass it back to Morley to close this out, but thank you for being here. We appreciate all of that great insight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And it has been a wonderful session throughout. And my sincere thanks to the distinguished speakers and panelists for sharing their deeper insights, especially into the readiness aspects of an enterprise transformation, and particularly on all the three dimensions of people, process, and technology. I'm sure these insights will be very valuable for the audience today. And thank you, audience, to you as well. And I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed this session. Thank you very much.